Hi, let's talk about what's behind the tariff war that the Trump raised. I think one of the important thing is the important goal is that let's assume that he knows what he wants, right? Because oftentimes he does not. One of the goal is that to make the manufacturing as much as possible coming back to the U.S. Okay, so let's use the iPhone manufacturing as a good example to show that why is that a goal unlikely to be realized. Let's call it a Yankee iPhone, right? And then here's a little bit history. I was reading an article from a CNBC. I think it was published yesterday. Um, it tells us that how much of the cost for a Yankee iPhone. Okay. And then there are different estimates. And then some say, let's say right now, the iPhone 16 or 17, because I don't use iPhone. So it's probably 16, and it will be cost like a 1100, a little bit over 1100. And then different estimation of flying around. Some say it will be at least 1,500, and some people say it will be at least like 3,500. So, but anyway, one thing is for sure that the cost will be significantly up. But here is the why. Here is the reason that we have to understand the driving forces behind. Uh, let's say I actually asked myself. I said, what about the labor cost is out of it. Let's forget about the labor cost. Let's assume that in the future, the robots is so well designed that the dexterity of robots of the machine is as good as human labor, right? Then what that? What's the next challenge? I think the next challenge is a global supply chain. That one Trump will probably not take into account. Um, but there have been several attempts in the past that back in 2017, there was like a 10 billion investment in for Foxconn to set up a plant in Wisconsin. And then, but that's basically a miserable failed because Apple itself never connected that plant in Wisconsin. You know what it ended up doing in the during the pandemics? That Foxconn plant in Wisconsin ended up producing a whole bunch of face masks um, instead of making iPhones. Okay, and then they claim at the time when the investment happened, they assumed that they will have created like 13,000 jobs, but in fact, it's only like less than 1,500 jobs. So it's a big disaster, you know. So it's not like so the political will is very strong. However, let's think about Don Quixote, the famous Spanish novel. Um, he is using his lens to fire the windmill. But today, what is the modern time of Don Quixote that Trump wants to turn himself into? Is that the same? He instead of fighting the windmill, he is fighting the global supply chain. Okay, the global supply chain is basically the most fundamental force is that you admit the diversity, you admit that the talent resources are not evenly distributed across the country, across the world, but they have a difference. Okay, their diversity. So global supply chain, which is one of the biggest thing that behind the globalization, is that we ac- we accept that. We take that for granted that resources are not evenly distributed. So we take advantage of that. We make that into our advantage. And then so we use different places. For example, in Asia, Tim Cook was once said that in American, it's harder to fund one football field of the tooling engineer, but in China, in Asia, you can easily fill it out. So many tooling engineering for like several football field. So those kind of differences, those kind of diversity, it's behind the global supply chain. Okay, now we have to accept that. If you don't believe that, you have a strong political will, and then everything you make it come to the USA, then you have to worry about the supply chain. You disrupt the entire global supply chain and do it from scratch. That's a that's a miserable thing to do. It's never going to be work, and and the cost will be tremendous. Okay, so that's why I think that I ask myself the question: what if the labor cost we can assume they're the same? In the future, you imagine you picture a factory in the U.S. There is a whole bunch of robots machine doing everything. But even that, you still have to worry about global supply chain. Okay, that's the thing.